We let our son live rent-free. Then he insulted us for not buying him a house. So we taught him a lesson he'll never forget. For years, my wife and I let our son, Tyler, live at home rent-free. We covered his expenses, gave him a roof over his head, and even helped him save money for his future. But when we told him it was time to start contributing, he laughed in our faces. "You guys are so selfish," he scoffed. "Other parents buy their kids' houses, and you expect me to pay rent?" We were stunned. We had given him everything, but apparently it wasn't enough. So we decided to teach him a lesson he'd never forget. And now, he's begging to come back. Before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. For years, my wife and I did everything we could to set our son, Tyler, up for success. We weren't rich, but we worked hard to make sure he had a stable home, food on the table, and every opportunity to build a good life. When he turned 18, we told him he could stay as long as he needed while he figured things out. We didn't ask for rent. We didn't pressure him. We just wanted him to be responsible. But instead of working toward his future, Tyler took full advantage of us. At first, we gave him space to decide what he wanted to do. College, a trade, a job, anything would have been fine. But Tyler, he chose nothing. For 2 years, he did absolutely nothing. No job, no school, no effort. He slept until noon, played video games all night, and spent whatever little money he had on junk food and online subscriptions. We tried to talk to him. "Tyler, you need to start thinking about your future. You can't just live here forever without contributing. We love you, but it's time to grow up." But every time, he had an excuse. "The job market is trash right now. I don't want to work some boring minimum wage job. You guys never pressured me before. Why start now?" For a while, we let it slide. We didn't want to push too hard. But then, Tyler crossed the line, and suddenly, we realized it was time to teach him a lesson he'd never forget. One evening, after another long day at work, my wife and I sat at the dinner table while Tyler was, as usual, holed up in his room playing video games. We could hear him laughing with his online friends, completely oblivious to the fact that we were downstairs, once again, paying all the bills that kept his comfortable little life running. That's when my wife sighed and looked at me. "We need to talk to him again. This has gone too far." She was right. So we called him downstairs, and after rolling his eyes and acting like it was the biggest inconvenience in the world, he finally sat down across from us. "Tyler, we need to have a serious conversation," I started. "You've been living here rent-free for 2 years. You're not in school, you're not working, and we're covering all of your expenses. This isn't sustainable." He groaned, slouching in his chair. "Oh my God, are we really doing this again?" "Yes, we are," my wife snapped, losing patience. "We're not asking for much, but you need to start contributing. It's time to either get a job or pay rent. That's the reality of being an adult." And then, Tyler laughed. Not an embarrassed laugh, not a nervous laugh, a full, arrogant, condescending laugh. "Wow, you guys are actually serious? That's insane." I stared at him, stunned. "What's insane, Tyler?" He shook his head, smirking. "You guys are acting like I'm some kind of burden. Parents are supposed to help their kids. I've seen TikToks about this. Other parents are actually buying their kids' houses, and you're sitting here asking me for rent?" My wife's jaw dropped. I could feel my blood boiling. "You think we owe you a house?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm. He shrugged. "I mean, yeah, you guys had me. It's your responsibility to make sure I have a good life. That's just basic parenting." That was it. That was the moment I realized we had raised an entitled brat. I took a slow breath, my hands clenched into fists under the table. "All right, Tyler, you're right about one thing. Parents do help their kids, and we have. But there's a difference between helping and enabling, and we've been enabling you for too long." He rolled his eyes. "Oh, here we go?" "No," I cut him off. "You've made it clear how you see us. You don't see us as parents who have worked our entire lives to give you every opportunity. You see us as a bank. Well, guess what? The bank is closing." His smirk disappeared. "What does that mean?" he asked, sitting up a little straighter. I folded my arms. "It means you have 30 days to move out." the color drained from his face. Wait, what? You're actually kicking me out? You're an adult, right? I said. You expect us to buy you a house? Then go figure it out yourself. You have a month to get a job, find a place, and start paying your own way. Welcome to the real world. For the first time in 2 years, Tyler had nothing to say. Tyler sat there, completely stunned. He had expected us to back down, to apologize for pressuring him, to let him continue living rent-free while contributing nothing. But this time, he was out of luck. You can't be serious, he stammered. My wife folded her arms, her expression unreadable. Oh, we're very serious. You've spent 2 years sitting in this house, eating our food, using our electricity, wasting your days playing video games, and giving us nothing but attitude when we ask you to do the bare minimum. And now, you have the nerve to act like we owe you a house? Absolutely not. He scoffed, shaking his head like we were being unreasonable. You guys are making a huge mistake. You don't just throw your own kid out. I leaned forward, keeping my voice calm but firm. We're not throwing you out, Tyler. We're giving you a wake-up call. You have 30 days. That's more than enough time to get a job and figure out a place to stay. You are a grown man, and it's time you start acting like one. He looked at me, then at his mom, waiting for one of us to crack, waiting for us to say, "We're just kidding," waiting for us to take it all back. But we didn't. We just sat there, letting the reality of the situation sink in. Finally, he pushed back his chair, standing up so fast that it scraped against the floor. "Fine," he snapped. "If that's how you guys want to be, I'll figure something out. But don't expect me to ever come back after this." My wife shrugged. "That's your choice." He stormed upstairs, slamming his bedroom door so hard that a picture on the wall shook. We sat there for a moment in silence before my wife let out a deep breath. Did we just do the right thing? I looked at the empty seat where Tyler had been sitting, thinking about all the times we had tried to talk to him, to guide him, to teach him responsibility. We had given him every opportunity, and all he had done was take and take and take. "Yes," I said finally, "we did." And for the first time in years, I felt no doubt about it. The house was tense for the next few days. Tyler barely spoke to us, locking himself in his room for hours at a time. When he did come downstairs, he wouldn't look at us, wouldn't acknowledge us, and certainly wouldn't accept that he had done anything wrong. He was sulking, waiting for us to break first. But we didn't. Instead, my wife and I started preparing for his move-out day. We cleared out space in the garage where he could put his things, reminded him of his 30-day deadline, and even left job applications on the kitchen counter. We weren't throwing him out with nothing. We were giving him every chance to figure it out. But that didn't matter to him. "You guys are being ridiculous," he muttered one morning as he grabbed a soda from the fridge. I sighed, setting down my coffee. "No, Tyler, we're being parents. Parents who are tired of being taken advantage of," he scoffed. "You guys are just mad because I don't want to be your little servant. You act like I'm some kind of freeloader." I blinked at him. "Tyler, you are a freeloader. That's the problem." His face twisted in pure offense. "I'm your son. It's not freeloading, it's family." My wife, who had been quiet up until now, finally lost it. Family? Family helps each other. Family supports each other. Family doesn't sit around demanding everything be handed to them while giving nothing in return. She crossed her arms. "Tell me, Tyler, what have you done for this family in the last 2 years?" He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. She nodded. "Exactly." For the first time, I saw a flicker of doubt in his expression. He knew she was right, but he was too stubborn to admit it. Finally, he muttered, "Whatever. I'll figure something out." I took a slow sip of my coffee. "Good. You have 25 days left." As the days ticked by, Tyler started to realize we weren't bluffing. At first, he still carried himself with that same arrogant attitude, acting like he had everything under control. But, little by little, reality started hitting him. At first, he ignored the job applications we left for him, claiming he was working on something bigger. When we asked what that meant, he just shrugged and said, "I don't know yet, but I'm not going to waste my time flipping burgers." A week later, I caught him scrolling through apartment listings on his phone, his expression not nearly as cocky as before. It was clear that he had never actually considered how expensive rent was. One evening, my wife and I were watching TV when he stomped into the room, arms crossed. How do you expect me to afford a place when rent is so high? I muted the TV and looked at him. You get a job, you save, you start small like everyone else. But I don't want to live in some tiny dump, he snapped. Then work harder, I shot back. You want something better? Earn it. That's what we did. He clenched his jaw, not used to being told no. But the cracks in his arrogance were starting to show. At one point, he even tried calling his grandparents, probably thinking they'd take pity on him and let him live with them. But when he got off the phone, he looked furious. They told me to listen to you, he muttered under his breath. I smirked. Damn right they did. As the final days of his deadline approached, something changed. His panic was no longer hidden. He spent more time alone in his room, barely ate dinner with us, and his usual sarcastic remarks, gone. Then, the night before his move-out date, he finally cracked. Can we talk? He asked quietly, standing in the kitchen doorway. I set my coffee down and nodded. Go ahead. He hesitated, looking at my wife, then back at me. Finally, in a voice I barely recognized, he muttered, I screwed up. It was the first time in 2 years that he had admitted he was wrong. Hearing Tyler admit he had screwed up was the first real sign of growth I had seen in him in years. But I wasn't about to let him off the hook just because he finally realized what was happening. I leaned back in my chair, folding my arms. Yeah? How so? He shifted uncomfortably, clearly not used to owning up to his mistakes. I thought you guys were just being mean. I thought you were trying to make my life harder for no reason, but I get it now. I raised an eyebrow. What exactly do you get? He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. That I was being a brat. That I expected everything to be handed to me just because I lived here. I thought things would just work out, that I wouldn't have to do all this adult stuff yet. But now, I don't know what I'm going to do. For the first time in this entire process, he actually looked scared. My wife, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. This is what we were trying to teach you, Tyler. The real world doesn't wait for you to figure things out. You either step up or you get left behind. He swallowed hard. I know, and I get if you don't believe me, but I want to fix this. I don't want to be this guy anymore. I studied him for a long moment. Part of me wanted to believe him. Part of me wanted to remind him that just a few weeks ago, he was laughing in our faces, acting like we owed him a house. But this felt different. Okay, I said finally. Prove it. His eyes widened slightly. How? Tomorrow is your deadline. You still need to move out. But if you can show us over the next few months that you're serious, if you get a job, if you start saving, if you actually put in the effort, we'll help you get on your feet. But we're not doing it for you. You have to earn it. He exhaled slowly and nodded. I will. I promise. We had heard a lot of promises from Tyler before, but this time, for the first time in years, I actually believed him. The next morning, Tyler packed his bags. He wasn't happy about it, but to his credit, he didn't argue. He had spent the last 2 years believing he was entitled to everything we had given him, but now, he was finally facing reality. He had managed to find a cheap room for rent in a shared apartment with some guys he knew from high school. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't spacious, and it definitely wasn't the house he thought we owed him. But it was something. It was his. I stood at the door as he loaded the last of his things into his car. My wife watched from the porch, arms crossed, her face unreadable. You ready? I asked. He looked back at me, hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Yeah, I think so. Good. This is what being an adult looks like, figuring things out, taking care of yourself. He sighed, shoving his hands in his pockets. I know I've been an ass. I don't expect you guys to forget that overnight. He hesitated, then finally muttered, but thanks for not giving up on me. I nodded, keeping my face neutral. We never gave up on you, Tyler. We just refused to keep letting you take advantage of us. He didn't argue. He didn't get defensive. He just nodded, climbed into his car, and pulled away. For the first time, he was truly on his own. That night, my wife and I sat in the quiet house, sipping our coffee. It felt different, lighter. We had spent so much time carrying him, worrying about him, wondering if we were doing the right thing. But now, he was finally learning. It wasn't easy, it wasn't fun, but it was necessary. And for the first time, I felt hopeful that maybe, just maybe, he would finally become the man we had raised him to be. A week passed, then two. At first, we didn't hear much from Tyler, and honestly, that was fine. We had spent so much time worrying about him, bending over backward to make sure he had everything he needed. And now that he was out on his own, it felt good to breathe again. Then, one evening, I got a text from him. I got a job. I stared at the screen for a long moment before showing my wife. She raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. "Where at?" I finally replied. "Grocery store. Nothing fancy, but it's something." That was the first time I'd ever heard Tyler talk about work without turning his nose up at it. Over the next few weeks, he checked in every now and then. He wasn't asking for money, wasn't making excuses, wasn't complaining about how unfair life was. He was actually trying. One night, after his shift, he called. "I get it now," he said, sounding exhausted. "Get what?" I asked, though I already knew. "Why you were so mad," he admitted. "I used to think work was just something you guys did because you had to. I never really thought about how hard it was, how much it takes just to keep things running. I never appreciated any of it." For the first time, he understood. "It's not easy, is it?" I said, leaning back in my chair. "No," he admitted. "But I'm doing it. I just wish I'd figured this out sooner." I smiled slightly. "Better late than never, kid." Tyler wasn't perfect. He still had a long way to go. But for the first time, I felt like he was finally becoming the man we had raised him to be. A month after Tyler moved out, he stopped by for dinner. It wasn't planned. He just showed up at the door, looking different. Not in any dramatic way, but in a way only a parent would notice. He stood up a little straighter. His usual smug expression was gone. And when he stepped inside, he actually looked grateful to be there. We sat down for dinner, and for the first time in a long time, the conversation wasn't tense or forced. He told us about his job, how he had picked up extra shifts to save money, how he was learning to budget and cook for himself. He even laughed about the struggles of living with roommates, something he had once thought was beneath him. "It's weird," he admitted between bites of food. "I used to think having to work all the time would suck, but it actually feels kinda good, you know?" I smirked. "Oh yeah?" He nodded, looking a little sheepish. "Yeah, I mean, I still hate waking up early, but it's different when you know you're actually taking care of yourself. It feels, I don't know, like I'm doing something that matters." My wife and I exchanged a look. This was a completely different person from the kid who had stood in our kitchen weeks ago, demanding a house like it was his birthright. After dinner, as he was getting ready to leave, he hesitated at the door. "Hey, I just wanted to say thanks for everything, for pushing me, for not letting me stay the way I was." I nodded. "We weren't going to let you waste your life, Tyler. That's what parents do." He gave a small, genuine smile. "Well, I get it now, and I appreciate it. I really do." For the first time in years, I felt like I was finally talking to a man, not a boy. Tyler left that night, but something about the way he said goodbye felt different. It wasn't forced. It wasn't out of obligation. He actually meant it. A few months later, he called me out of the blue. "Hey, Dad, I was wondering if you could come with me to check out a used car I found. I want to make sure I don't get ripped off." I almost dropped the phone. The same kid who once laughed in our faces for suggesting he get a job was now asking for advice on how to make a responsible purchase. I agreed, and when I met him at the dealership, I saw a completely different version of my son. He had saved enough for a solid down payment, researched the car's history, and asked the right questions. This wasn't entitled, spoiled Tyler. This was a man who had learned the value of hard work. As we shook hands with the seller, he turned to me with a look of pure gratitude. "You guys did the right thing," he admitted, "kicking me out. If you hadn't, I'd still be sitting at home doing nothing." I clapped him on the back, my chest tightening just a little. "We never wanted to hurt you, Tyler. We just wanted you to grow up." He nodded. "Yeah, and I finally did." That was the moment I knew. We had done the right thing. Entitlement doesn't just disappear. It has to be unlearned. And sometimes, the best way to teach someone responsibility is to let them experience the real world. Now, let me ask you, have you ever had to give someone a reality check like this? How did it turn out? Drop your stories in the comments. I'd love to hear them. And if you made it this far, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you in the next one.